The FBI just conducts sham investigations so they can justify stonewalling questions about Democrat corruption.
Is the FBI, do they make a routine practice of allowing partisan political optics to prevent investigating serious evidence of corruption?
My instructions to our people on this and on every other investigation are that we are to follow the facts wherever they lead, no matter who likes it, no matter what political influence
Then why
there
did
may
you
be
get the
out there.
GPS data on where Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were?
Again, Senator, with respect, I can't discuss
But it's
an
not
ongoing
with respect.
investigation.
And Director Wray, you and I have gone round and round on this because I understand anytime you're asked about this, the answer is it's an ongoing investigation. Of course, the investigation isn't ongoing. You're not doing the work.
The only way the FBI is going to investigate the Biden family is if they go to Mass on Sundays. That's right. A House Judiciary report says the FBI has been investigating Catholics. The Bureau designated strains of Catholicism as domestic terrorism and are treating the church like a gang or a terror cell. The FBI used undercover agents to interrogate a Catholic priest and a choir director. The FBI tried recruiting informants within the clergy. Is the FBI listening to you during confession? God, I hope not. Well, the director said it was just a mistake.
How many other parishes around the country have priests or choir directors been approached? By the way, are Catholic choirs now, are they breeding grounds for domestic terrorism? Is this your latest theory? How many other parishes have FBI agents approached priests and choir directors to ask about parishioners?
Look, Senator, we do not and will not conduct investigations based on anybody's exercise of their constitutionally
You
protected
have
religion.
done so, and your memo explicitly asks for it. Your memo labels traditional Catholics as racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists in need of investigation.
So after 9/11, the FBI infiltrated mosques and conducted surveillance of American imams to fight the war on terror. Remember how the ACLU, the Democrats, and the media found out about it and they were hysterical? But the ACLU, the media, and the Democrats haven't said a word about the FBI infiltrating the Catholic Church. The left isn't actually against unconstitutional searches and seizure. They just want to be the ones searching and seizing. And Joe Biden loves to brag about his Catholic faith. Well, the Catholic Church was just illegally infiltrated by the FBI. I'm sure Binder will release a statement about Islamophobia. That should cover it. Now, JFK was the first Catholic president in American history, and he was proud of his faith.
I'm a Catholic, and no Catholic has ever been elected president. The real issues in this campaign have been obscured. Not what kind of church I believe in, for that should be important only to me, but what kind of America I believe in.
RFK Jr. is running for president, also a Catholic, and he joins me now. So would you, as president, fire the FBI director?
Well, I would certainly question him about these issues. I think you were right to point out the different application of ethics here on a kind of a political line. We were horrified during the 1960s that the FBI had infiltrated the civil rights movement. It infiltrated the anti-war movement. As you pointed out, after 9/11, it began infiltrating innocent Americans who were attending Mass. And in the last couple of years in COVID, DHS was found also to be doing the same thing with the medical freedom movement. So I think this is bad, where it should not be a partisan issue. We should all be concerned. You know, my father, Jesse, in his first week as Attorney General, he was the senior law enforcement officer in the country. And of course, the Attorney General is in charge of the FBI as well, and he called all of the branch and division heads into his office and said, I want you all to understand one rule, that during this administration there is going to be no weaponization or politicization of law enforcement capacity in this country. If somebody's a Democrat or Republican, they get treated equally. And,
Well, that would mean that if you were president, then you'd have to fire the director because this guy is politicized the bejesus out of the Bureau. You weren't ever on Jeffrey Epstein's jet, were you?
I was on Jeffrey Epstein's jet 2 times. I was on it in 1993, and I was on it and I went to Florida with my wife and 2 children to visit my mom over Easter. My wife had some kind of relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell, and they offered us a ride to Palm Beach. So I went then, and on another occasion, I flew again with my family, with I think 4 of my children, and Mary, my wife, to Rapid City, South Dakota, to go fossil hunting for a weekend, but otherwise I was never on his jet alone. I've been very open about this from the beginning. This was in '93, so it was 30 years ago. It was before anybody knew about Jeffrey Epstein's his nefarious issues, and I agree with you that all of this information should be released. And we should get real answers on what happened to Jeffrey Epstein and any of the high-level political people that he was involved with. All of that should be open to the public. It should be absolutely transparent. And, I don't see why any of those records would have any redactions in them. Why would we be hiding that from the American public?
Well, you might not even
outrageous.
Get a chance to do that because Mark Elias, the hotshot Democrat election attorney, is trying to basically kick you off ballots. What's going on there?
Well, I think both the Democrat and Republican Party are going to try to get me off the ballots. We're in the middle now of a ballot access petition drive, so we have to get 1 million Americans to sign petitions to get me on the ballots in the various states. People who want to sign up to get me on the ballot can go to Kennedy24.com and sign up now. But we're having an upsurge in people who are supporting me, and we're way ahead of where we intended to be at this point. And I think we are going to get on the ballot in all 50 states. And I know the Democrats are going to try to stop us. The Republicans are going to try to stop us. But I think a lot of Americans want an alternative to what the parties are offering them.
Well, that sure would be exciting to see you debate Trump and Biden. That would be must-see TV. RFK Jr., thanks for joining Jesse Waters Primetime and Shooting Straight.
Jesse, thanks for having me.
Let's bring in Democratic strategist extraordinaire James Carville to help make sense of these polls, okay? To beat Trump in a raw score favorable is almost impossible, okay? Bobby Kennedy, 52%. The net favorability poll, okay? Now we're going to get love-hate reckoned in there, right? He is plus 25. That is extraordinary. The third one is the one that really matters, which is if you vote today. RFK is pulling Ross Perot-like numbers. What do these numbers mean to you?
It would be evident to an amoeba that this country is not particularly satisfied with the choice between Biden and Trump. These numbers they're not like anything that we've seen before. If you combine every kind of volatility index you can think of in politics, it's all blinking red big time. I don't know how many times people have to say it through polling or through anything else that they're shopping around.
We are celebrating National Hispanic Heritage Month. We are passing on who we are to the next generation. And what we pass on is pride. We pass on passion. What we pass on are significant contributions to the growth and success of this country.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is on his way here to ask for your help, and we can help him to become the next president of the United States. And like his uncle and his father, Mr. Kennedy believes the Latino vote is very powerful. Enough. Put him in the office, and we're going to put him in the office.
And it's possible that that will happen because Latinos now make up, congratulations, the second largest voting bloc in America.
Everyone, let's get started and call to the stage a powerful voice of social justice, Obispo Juan Carlos Mendez, to bless our gathering.
We're praying for our candidate Kennedy, that he will win in this election and change the course of this nation. And Lord, I'm standing here before this wonderful group of people that are taking up this challenge as every American that loves this nation, that we're here to contribute to the public good of this nation. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Mr. Kennedy can talk with crowds and keep his virtue. He can walk with kings and not lose his common touch. Some people think that he possesses the earth, at least his character does, and everything that's in it. We're talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, with your help, will be the next president of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Thank you all very much. My father was very, very close to Cesar Chavez. He was probably my father's most beloved and important political ally. During that period of time, Cesar had two big issues. One of those was pesticides would disproportionately injure Hispanic farm workers. The other issue was closing the border. That's right. Cesar Chavez was a huge advocate for closing the border because he saw that this huge influx of illegal labor that could be had for pennies an hour in some cases was dampening the leverage that he had to bargain for his farm workers to get good wages and conditions. Over the last 3 years, since the new administration came in, there have been 7 million immigrants who have crossed illegally. During that same period, only 3.1 million immigrants came in legally. And the Mexican drug cartels are running the U.S. immigration policy now, and that's not good for our country, and it's not good for Mexico. The impulse to open the border that we saw at the beginning of the Biden administration was, for most Democrats in this country, was motivated by kindness, by a humanitarian impulse, by this idea that the United States should be a welcoming country. What I saw down there convinced me that this is not a way of demonstrating our kindness. We have created, through these open border policies, this extraordinary humanitarian crisis. The people who were coming across that night, they were coming up in buses, 55 on a bus. The buses are owned and operated by the Mexican drug cartels. All of the people that we talked to had gone through a nightmare. They had been exploited, extorted. Some of them had been robbed. They were beaten in some cases, and we heard all of these horrendous stories of rape. And the people, the taxpayers of Yuma, are financing this center to treat children and women who have been raped with the drug cartels called the final payment before they cross the border.
Kennedy está muy enfocado en lo que es la frontera. Eso me agrada mucho y qué bueno que él conozca el proceso que vive cada inmigrante al cruzar la frontera.
Que estuvo pues con la gente directamente cerca, ya nadie se lo cuenta, sino que darle esa importancia, ¿no? al sufrimiento, al sacrificio que hacemos por el sueño americano, y me parece muy bien que él tenga esa propuesta, esa iniciativa, ¿no? de mejorar un poco en eso.
And somebody just a moment ago shouted at me about the DNC. Well, you know, the DNC did the same thing they're doing to me. They did it to Bernie Sanders. Because Bernie Sanders posed a threat to the DNC's donor base. Well, I am 10 times the threat that Bernie Sanders was.
Escuchar a este hombre me pareció fascinante porque la gente necesita escuchar un hombre de conciencia, porque eso eleva el pensamiento, eleva el espíritu, inspira.
Do you think those billionaires and big corporations like Monsanto and Pfizer and BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard, do you think they gave those big million-dollar donations to the Democratic Party out of a patriotic impulse? Or out of a humanitarian impulse? I don't think so. I think they think they're going to get something for that money. I think they don't look at that as a donation. I think they look at it as an investment. And I'm going to make sure that they do not get a good return on that investment. I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you for your support. And I'll see you again.
Me gusta porque es un problema interno y ya es tiempo de arreglar el problema interno, de traer la democracia de regreso aquí a nuestra nación.
Thank you everyone for being here tonight. We're going to show a short film, and then after that Mr. Kennedy is going to take selfies with each and every one of you.
Yo les pregunto, ¿por qué el ingreso promedio en este país es $5,000? Menos que el índice básico del costo de vida? ¿Por qué una cuarta parte de los americanos tienen inseguridad alimentaria? ¿Y por qué en este país la mayoría no puede pagar por una emergencia de $1,000? No hay dinero para pagar por la atención médica. Ya es hora de que el pueblo americano tenga un presidente que trabaje para mejorar la economía del pueblo.
Me gustó que él se tomó el tiempo para aprender el idioma. Es muy importante para nosotros.
Kennedy es como una leyenda y él es la esperanza que todos tenemos, el sueño americano. Nos respeta como pueblo, como la raza, nos apoya y eso es lo que necesitamos.
Bobby Kennedy Jr. va a ser el cambio que necesitamos, no nada más los latinos, los humanos, toda la gente que vivimos aquí en América y nos hace americanos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Estoy feliz de que exista un candidato que nos represente a los latinos.
Súper increíble el hombre. Aparte que trae el nombre de Kennedy.
I think he's our man.
Voy con Bobby Kennedy.
I'm frightened that my children are going to grow up in America where they don't have the constitutional rights that I did. I want to talk a little bit about the response to COVID and how that system was used to rob us of our civil rights. They started with censorship, not just the Biden administration, but the Trump administration. Wall Street Journal said that censoring of the doctors, the scientists, the people who were criticizing some of these policies actually took lives. And the number of lives, we don't know, we'll never know. As soon as they realized that the American people were going to put up with this censorship, They started going after other constitutional rights. They closed the churches as the other leg of the First Amendment, freedom of worship, with no scientific citation, with no public hearings, no democratic process. And they went after the third leg of the First Amendment, which is freedom of assembly. They told us all don't go near each other. Then they went after property rights, Fifth Amendment. They closed 3.3 million businesses with no due process, no just compensation. And they went after jury trials. They said if you're involved in a countermeasure, if you're a vaccine company or remdesivir or any of these other countermeasures, or a hospital, nobody can sue you no matter how reckless you are, no matter how toxic the products that you're forcing on people, no matter what you do, you cannot be sued. Here's what the Seventh Amendment says. No American shall be denied the right of a trial before a jury of his peers in case there are controversies exceeding $20 in value. There's no pandemic exception. And then we went after the Fourth Amendment, prohibitions on warrantless searches and seizures. We obliterated that through all the track and trace surveillance. It was not a public health response. It was a militarized and monetized response to a public health crisis. Please go to Kennedy24.com.
What actions would you take to ensure free speech, free press, and an open internet acting as like a public square for discourse?
My first day in office, I'll issue an executive order against any federal agency or any federal regulator encouraging or promoting censorship at any social media site. I'll promote legislation to change the RICO Act, the Racketeering Act, which my father originally wrote, to include as a predicate offense the government dictated censorship of free speech. Also summons the heads of all of the major social media sites, including YouTube and Google, which continue to censor political speech in this country. And I'll tell them that they need to come up with a plan about how they're going to avoid censoring political speech, and the sanction, of course, ultimately is to transform them into public utilities and recognize that they now have become the public square.
Right.
And then also I'll put in legislation to amend the Communications Act, which includes Section 230. In that act, I will make the censorship of political speech illegal. Please go to Kennedy24.com.
In our 12-step programs, we do something called a 10th step every night, where we go do our inventory of what we're resentful for. What's coming up in your 10th step these days?
I'm pretty good about not hanging on to resentments.
You have to be.
There's two ways that most people process conflict and anger. And one of those ways is to internalize it and to turn it into a resentment. And that is like swallowing poison and hoping someone else will die. And the other way is to externalize it, turn it into anger or rage. And it ripples across the globe. So neither of those is a good way to do it. And I think the technique for handling anger is that you go to the source of your anger and then you explain how you feel about it. You know, without pointing the finger, without using the word you. Don't say you did this to me. Another technique is to pray for somebody that injures you. I remember a time when I turned my car around and chased a guy for 12 miles from White Plains to North Salem exit. But then I was late for the appointments that I was supposed to do that day, and the guy is living in my head rent-free. And that stranger now controls my happiness and my, capacity to maximize my impact on the world. And so somebody told me when somebody does that to you, to immediately just say a prayer for them. And it was like a miracle because it just went away. Now, I'm in control of my own life.
We forgive others not because they deserve forgiveness, but because we deserve peace.
Yeah,
so it's,
well, that's really good. You just said what I said in 10 minutes. I should have just said that. Can I write that down? A lot of people have a misunderstanding about freedom. They think of it as an excuse for self-indulgence, for self-interest, for elevating our own condition at the expense of our neighbors or our fellows. And in fact, the opposite is true. There's this faith that each of us has inside of ourselves, a yearning to do good things, a yearning to build communities, a yearning to be kind, a yearning to be of service to other people. And those impulses become stale and polluted and degraded when we're ordered to do those things. As we become the servants of international markets, as technology has separated and atomized us, and as government has grown farther away from the average American, that atomization, that fragmentation, it's not fertile fields, let me put it that way, for those virtues of compassion and kindness. In the community I grew up in, if you improved your fortune, it was likely you were improving the fortune of everybody around you. And there was a constant kind of reciprocal altruism that was going on, of kindness that brought out the best in human nature. As president, I'm going to try to restore this sense of community, to a connection to the soil, to the ecology, to local markets and farms. If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
When did you decide to run?
We decided together, by the way. But I had the idea first.
Yeah.
I have a favor, honey.
So when Bobby was talking about right now the country is so divided, we've been pitted against each other for so long. So when he started talking about a place in the middle where can't we bring two sides together so it's not just fighting all the time, but we try to work together, then it started making sense to me. And especially like he's talking about with the middle class. It's been ignored for so long. And then now that we've been out on the road together, really listening to people and they're struggling to pay their bills, to fill their gas tank. And that's really what people are interested in and what they need.
The media and social media and all that stuff pits us against each other. And it's not even real.
I know.
We're so similar in every way.
It's like the jangling keys. There's people who want to keep Americans apart. And we're all looking at the keys and, not seeing that he just stole the Tesla or whatever. You know, and we're all distracted by hating each other. And the central organizing theme of my campaign is finding values that we have in common rather than these little issues that keep us apart. If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
I want to talk about something that also plagues our communities, and that's criminal justice and mass incarceration.
The 1986 Criminal Justice Act, written by President Biden, was probably the worst blight on the African-American community. A kid who was in a black community that got caught with some crack got 100 times the penalty of a kid in a white community a mile away that had powder cocaine. By 1998, the black population in America's prisons had doubled. And they were for mainly nonviolent crimes. It was for drug crimes. And we destroyed an entire generation of black Americans. We made it in many states so they can't vote. They're disenfranchised. There was a generation of black children who were raised without their fathers. But prisons are now the biggest industry in rural areas in our country. And I want to develop instead a string of farm drug rehabs, healing farms in those same rural communities where people can go if they get involved with drugs, if they're debilitated by depression or dependence on psychiatric drugs, and where they can receive job training, get social skills, and make sure they can get GEDs and education. When I'm president, I'm going to make sure that federal prisoners have access to 12-step programs. If somebody wants to recover, that's a perfect place to do it. I'm going to provide educational opportunities and make sure that we do everything that we can to identify model programs around the country that are working, and then try to adopt those protocols in other prisons. If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
Cancel culture is wild. It's crazy. Because when you cancel somebody, there they are, still existing, still thinking things, still believing what they believe. In fact, when you cancel people, it further entrenches them into their viewpoint, because you've made the world so cold for them that they're gonna go back to where it's warm, right? And so there's a lot of word that both sides use to cancel, right? Now, on the left, we might use words like, racist, and we might use words like anti-vaxxer. But on the right, they cancel with words like communist, words like woke, right? So Bill Shireman talks about the middle 70% when it comes to today's polarized politics. And what he says is that there's 15% of the electorate on either side that are so anti the other side, they're not going to talk to each other. So it's either super woke or super MAGA. Don't even count on them being at the table with each other. And then let's say in this pie, there's the 35% on either side who feels like they're silenced, who feels like if they say anything that they truly see is a problem with their own in-group, then that 15% will put them on the out-group, so they all feel like they're by themselves. But if you put those two sides together, the 35%, that is a 70% supermajority. The sides that are willing to talk to one another, willing to sit down and have problem-solving dialogue and be adults as they disagree, that's the Bobby constituency. And it scares the hell out of the mainstream media that he could appeal to that group of folks, the ones who actually want America to work and are willing to sit down and hash out their agreements like true patriots, You could be a libertarian, you could be a Republican, but if you're in that 70%, that means that you've resolved to handle these differences, and canceling ain't a part of that, right? If you have resolved to stay at the table like a grown-up and handle the things that we all have in common, and hash out a solution, you may have to admit that you've been wrong. You may have to admit that you overlooked a few details. And we create an atmosphere where that's okay. That's what the social cohesion element is about, right? And so I disagree with Bobby on certain things. I voiced those concerns, and guess what he did? Listen. And that's what we need to start doing for one another as Americans. And that's how you heal the divide.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
A recent survey from the New York Times and Siena College showed Biden's seating support from Black battleground state voters to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. For more on that, let's bring in opinion editor at the Washington Post, Alexi McCammond. Her latest piece is entitled Democrats Need to Get Real about RFK Jr.'s strength with Black voters. Alexi, where is it coming from?
One thing that is clear in polling trends, focus group trends, and otherwise is that Black voters and other voters are looking for an alternative. Black voters have long felt and said and showed us that they feel taken for granted by the Democratic Party. We've seen the ways in which VP Harris hasn't been supported as much as some folks would like by the Democratic Party, by President Biden. And the real kicker with RFK Jr., and something that is particularly unique to him, is that he taps into this deep-seated, deep-rooted medical skepticism that a lot of Black folks across the country feel, rightfully so. There has been medical racism going back, to the 1800s through now. He's really trying to get at what other folks aren't saying to these voters, which is, I hear you, I see you, I understand why you might feel this way.
Rev, curious about your thoughts. People have real skepticism based on history, Tuskegee experiment just being one, about vaccines, and Robert Jr. has played into that. He's also been one that's been a hero in the environmental movement, environmental racism, that many of us supported his raising that prior to his running.
He's couching a lot of this stuff in terms of civil rights, as I'm sure you know, Rev. And he's also talking a lot like Milei, who was just elected in Argentina, this sort of populist rhetoric that's painting a very hopeful vision for the future. Biden also needs to give these folks a reason to be excited, a reason to vote for him. And a lot of voters are sick of casting a throwaway ballot, or what they say is a ballot for the lesser of two evils. And that's one of the big differences between, I think, 2016, 2020, and 2024. I think especially after the COVID pandemic, people feel much more individualistic. They're much more concerned about themselves than they are with group affiliation. That diminishes Democratic Party loyalty. That diminishes loyalty folks might have had to Biden in the past, thinking he would do the right thing.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
So you guys obviously lived together for years.
You mean now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys snuggle. Do you guys watch a movie and snuggle together?
Yeah. We do. That's
My
You
bad,
know
my
who
bad.
doesn't cuddle?
Who?
He doesn't cuddle.
Oh.
Don't you think it's a waste of time a little bit?
I don't. It seems like a time to connect with someone. No? Is that
Thank
crazy?
you,
But
Cheryl.
Robert, can you back me up on this, right?
No.
When you first met him, did you think he was attractive?
I thought, you know what? He wasn't really my vibe.
In your face. Oh, man.
How does that feel?
sad is that, man? Holy man, you got to live with that.
I remember him wearing pleated khakis, and I was like, whoa, okay.
Whoa, dude.
That's not my vibe. But
No
also-
one's vibe. That's no one's vibe.
No one's vibe.
She got me out of those immediately.
That sounds weird.
Because you look great now. What you're wearing now, I love. You know?
Yeah, that's good.
Cool jeans.
This was my uniform, blue jeans before I got sober.
Oh, okay.
It was part of my spiritual realignment when I came in. I switched to khakis, but then she
She broke your spiritual life.
But it was like a slow burn then.
Well, I never saw him. I never really thought about him, no offense, for years.
she came to another event.
Yeah.
7 years later.
And then there was like a little connection, like, oh, hi.
I knew when I wanted to date her, when I could tell how attracted she was to me. I went to Larry. I know Larry has a lot of rules about that kind of stuff, since she was his television wife, and that it would be important that I ask his permission. So I said, I want you to know that I'm attracted to Cheryl, and what would you think if I was dating her? He acted very excited and happy, and he said some things about Cheryl that I now know to be true. He said she was the most perfect human being that he'd ever met.
Heaven's sake.
And that he said she was beloved in her industry, that she was the only person in the industry who didn't have a single enemy.
Yeah.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com. I started doing hawking when I was 9 years old. My uncle, President Kennedy, was in the White House at that time, and a lot of people were talking about Camelot, and I read a book about Camelot, about the young King Arthur, called The Once and Future King by T.H. White. And T.H. White was a British falconer, and so he had a chapter in that book about young King Arthur and learning falconry. And I read that. It was very, very detailed and to me, absolutely riveting. And I told my dad and mom that that's what I wanted to do. I became obsessed with it after reading that book. And there's not been any time really in my life since then that I haven't had birds and hadn't been involved with the sport. And I've been hunting in the Hudson Valley my whole life. I've also hunted all over the world with the falcons, including in the Middle East and in Scotland and Japan, finding local falconers in those countries and going hunting with them. And it's been one of the great joys of my life. If people ask me what I love about the sport, I love everything about it, because when you're flying a hawk, the hawk is not doing anything that it would not be doing naturally. It's just doing the same thing that it does in the wild, but it's letting you accompany it. And it's kind of like being allowed to hunt with a wolf pack. If the wolves would actually allow you to go out with them and follow them and observe them at close hand, it's this really sort of atavistic partnership where you're dealing with a species that broke off our DNA chain millions of years ago, and we're kind of reunited, having this extraordinary experience in the woods, in the fields, in the forest. To me, it's like a spiritual experience. If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
Mr. Kennedy, I've also spent a lot of time on the border. 7 million is an inaccurate figure. It's closer to 6 million encounters over the last 3 years, and that includes people who were subject to Title 42 expulsions, meaning they were not allowed to enter.
And how many of those, what percentage of those people were turned back?
I don't have an exact figure, sir, but
And
the
those
7
are
million you're saying
encounters.
is inaccurate.
There's also 1.5 million who have come over that are runaways.
So back to my question, how would you
the
seal
number
the
is
border?
approximately 7 million have come across and are here today in this country.
It is not 7 million over the last 3 years. That's just inaccurate.
Hello, I'm Chris Clem. I'm a recently retired Chief Patrol Agent of the U.S. Border Patrol. I spent over 27 and a half years as an agent across the southwest border, the Gulf Coast, and Washington, D.C. Recently, I heard an interview where a reporter challenged the claim of 7 million people entering the United States as inaccurate. Let's break that down. During fiscal year 21 through 23, the U.S. Border Patrol made 5.9 million arrests, plus they documented 1.5 million gotaways. That's 7.4 million people. Now, Customs and Border Protection during that same time frame along the southwest border made 6.5 million arrests, plus those 1.5 million gotaways puts us at 8 million people. Now, nationwide, Customs and Border Protection during that same time frame made 7.9 million arrests, plus those 1.5 million gotaways puts us at 9.4 million people. Any way you slice it, that's over 7 million people entering this country. Now, all of these stats can be found on cbp.gov. Now, the gotaways aren't listed there, but we do know that recently the Secretary of Homeland Security did testify to the over 600,000 known gotaways last year alone. Plus, the U.S. Border Patrol must report the gotaways under congressional laws. Now, you don't have to like the facts, but you can't ignore them.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
I did want to ask about your family's relationship with the special operations community. People that are watching or listening to this might know, but some might not, that your uncle authorized the wearing of the Green Beret for Army Special Forces and was president when the first 2 SEAL teams were commissioned.
My uncle famously said that courage is the most important virtue because all the other virtues rely on it.
Yeah, first edition right there. Inaugural edition,
He
Profiles
won
in
the
Courage.
Pulitzer Prize for Profiles in Courage, but they loved war heroes. You know, my uncle was the only president in history to win the Purple Heart. At that time, the Pentagon did not like the Green Berets, and they ordered them to give up their berets. And my uncle issued an executive order saying that they could wear the berets, and he became very, very close, and all of us did, to Major Ruddy, who was at that time the top commander of the Green Berets. My father made sure that when my uncle was killed, a Green Beret was included in the pallbearers, and Major Ruddy left his beret on my uncle's grave. And after that, there was a little black ribbon that was affixed to the Green Beret as a memory to my uncle. But as you pointed out, my uncle launched the SEALs. So the first 2 SEAL teams were a project that was very dear to his heart because he wanted a special forces group that was attached to the Navy. And so he launched the first 2 SEAL teams, and that was the beginning of the Navy SEALs.
Incredible.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.